My name is Leah Price, and I was 45 years old when my brother tried to bury his bookkeeping problem inside my reputation. The first warning came from my boss, Elaine Carter. She closed her office door, placed one printed note on the desk, and turned it so I could read the line she had underlined in blue: concern regarding Leah Price's reliability. I knew that sentence. I had spent 15 years writing clean sentences for messy people in crisis. This time, the crisis was me. Elaine said, "Your brother called yesterday. He said your family is worried you're becoming unstable over your father's workshop records." The office clock clicked once. I remember that sound, because nothing else in the room moved. Then Elaine added the part that made the note feel heavier. "He also said your judgment might affect your promotion." My promotion. The senior communications director role I had spent years earning. One phone call from my brother had walked into my workplace wearing a suit and calling itself concern. 2 weeks later, at Thanksgiving dinner, Darren lifted his glass in front of 20 relatives and said, "Apparently being useful made you forget who actually belongs here." A cousin laughed. My aunt smiled like she wanted the joke to end, without anyone admitting it was cruel. My father looked down at his plate. That was when the picture sharpened. They were not calling me unreliable because I had made a mistake. They were doing it because my father's old workshop ledger had dates they needed buried. What they did not know was that I had already filed the public records request. The committee minutes were coming. The missing attachment was coming. The payment timeline was coming. And one question in that packet was going to turn their Thanksgiving joke into an official correction. Don't decide too early. Stay with me until the committee chair asks the question my family never prepared for. My father's workshop sat at the edge of town between a tire shop and a laundromat with a broken soda machine outside. The sign still said Price Repair and Fabrication, though the red paint had faded into a dull brick color. Inside, the air held the same smells from my childhood: motor oil, old wood, dust, coffee, and metal warmed by summer heat. People brought my father broken things they could not afford to replace: lawnmower engines, bent hinges, generators that refused to start before storms. Small machines from small lives, all carried through that roll-up door with hope and embarrassment. My father never made people feel stupid for needing help. He wrote every repair into a brown ledger with rounded corners and a rubber band around it. Customer name, date, part, cash paid, balance owed. He wrote carefully, slowly, with the same black pen he clipped inside his shirt pocket. Darren called that ledger Dad's museum piece. I called it the only honest witness in the family. When my father got older, the workshop stopped opening every day. First it was 3 days a week. Then, only Saturdays. Then only when someone knocked and found him there, sitting under the wall fan, sorting screws into coffee cans. That was when Darren announced his big idea. He wanted to turn the old shop into a community training space. Trade classes, local business workshops, donor nights, city committee photo ops, youth mentorship, public-private partnership. He had a phrase for everything. The Price Legacy Project. Darren loved names that made people clap before they asked questions. He looked good, standing beside banners. He had the family smile, the easy handshake, the voice that made unfinished plans sound funded. His wife, Marissa, handled the books. She wore cream sweaters, carried a clipboard, and smiled like every receipt was too boring to explain. She never sounded defensive. That was her gift. She could refuse to answer a question in a tone so gentle the person asking felt rude. I worked in crisis communications for a regional nonprofit. My job was simple on paper and exhausting in practice. When public problems started smoking, I found the source before the room caught fire. I wrote statements. I corrected timelines. I prepared executives who wanted sympathy without accountability. I knew the difference between a mistake and a cover story. That should have protected me. Instead, it made me useful. Darren sent me donor emails at midnight with one line: "Can you make this sound less bad?" Marissa sent screenshots of budget summaries and asked, "Does this wording feel okay?" My father called when Darren panicked before committee meetings. My aunt called when relatives thought I was being difficult. Everyone knew how to find me when a sentence needed cleaning. Nobody knew how to credit me when the room applauded. At first, I helped because of my father. He still looked at the workshop like it was attached to him. Whenever Darren talked about turning it into something bigger, my father's face changed. Not happy exactly. More like relief that the old place might keep breathing after he could not. So I edited statements. I softened emails. I fixed public language that would have made donors nervous. I took Darren's messy paragraphs and gave them structure. I thought I was protecting my father's dream. That was the mistake that kept me trapped longest. I mistook access for trust. I mistook responsibility for belonging. The first odd detail came in a donor update Marissa sent as a screenshot. Not a document. Not a spreadsheet. A screenshot. It showed a vendor charge labeled Community Outreach. The amount was too large for flyers, food, or event supplies. I texted, "What was this charge actually for?" Marissa replied, "Small outreach bundle." I wrote, "Can you send the source file?" She answered, "I'm not near my laptop." The metadata on the screenshot showed it had been exported 7 minutes earlier. That was the first tab in my head. 7 minutes. The second detail came the next week. Darren asked me to clean up a draft for the redevelopment committee. The draft mentioned a correction request that had been verbally resolved. I called him and asked, "What correction request?" He laughed. "Lee, this is why nobody invites communications people to family dinner. You make everything sound like a court hearing." I said, "Was there a written request?" He said, "Don't be dramatic." There it was, the family stop sign. Don't be dramatic meant I had found a door they wanted locked. The third detail was worse. Marissa sent a revised draft and forgot to crop the bottom of the screenshot. At the edge of the image, one line was visible. Waiting on Leah's version. My version of what? No one had asked me for one. I stared at the line until my phone went dim. Then I tapped the screen and took my own screenshot. That night, Darren called twice. I did not answer because I was in a work meeting. He texted, "Need you to clean one little thing before tomorrow." One little thing had become a family code for a mess big enough to leak. When I finally called back, he was irritated. "You're hard to reach lately." I was working. Everybody works, Leah. I looked at the screenshot on my laptop. What is Leah's version? The pause was small. Small enough that someone who loved him might miss it. I did not. He said, "Marissa probably meant your wording." "No, Darren. It says version." He exhaled. "Do you want to help, or do you want to interrogate everybody?" I should have hung up. Instead, I did what I had done for years. I tried to be reasonable with someone who had already decided reason was a delay tactic. I said, "Send me the original files, not screenshots." He said, "You're proving my point." I did not know then that he would repeat that phrase later, in a hallway, after a committee chair had his timeline in her hands. My promotion process began that same month. At work, I had a real chance to become senior communications director. Elaine told me privately that I was the strongest internal candidate. She said, "You have the calmest judgment in the department." That sentence mattered because calm judgment was the very thing my family questioned whenever I stopped agreeing with them. I did not tell Darren at first. I wanted the promotion to be mine, before it became family weather. But my aunt found out from a friend who worked near my office. She told my father. My father told Darren. Darren called that evening. "Senior director," he said. "Look at you." His voice sounded cheerful, but there was a sharp edge under the shine. "It's not official," I said. "Close enough." Then he added, "Must be nice having a job where people believe your version of things." I stood in my kitchen with one hand on the counter. "What does that mean?" He laughed. "Nothing. You always make things heavier than they need to be." 2 days later, Elaine called me into her office. She did not look angry. She looked careful. Careful is what people look like when they have been handed something ugly in polished language. The note on her desk had no company letterhead. It was her typed summary from Darren's call. She had underlined 3 phrases. Unstable over family records. Unreliable under pressure. Questionable judgment during promotion review. I asked her the only questions that mattered. Did he provide evidence? No. Did he identify any workplace incident? No. Did he make a formal complaint? No. He framed it as concern. Oh, concern. That soft little word people use when accusation would require evidence. Elaine folded her hands. I wanted to ask you directly, because it sounded rehearsed. That word gave me the first solid piece of ground. Rehearsed. Darren had not lost his temper. He had prepared a version of me that could carry his records problem. I said, I want all outside claims about my work performance documented. Not repeated informally. Elaine nodded. That is the correct approach. When I left her office, I opened the family group chat in the elevator. Darren had sent a turkey emoji. Marissa had written, can't wait to see everyone tonight. My father had liked the message. That night was Thanksgiving. I almost did not go. Then my father sent one private text. Hope you'll come. I want one normal dinner. That was how they got me. Not with orders. With a wish simple enough to make refusal look cruel. My aunt's house smelled like cinnamon candles and roasted onions. Coats covered the guest bed. Kids ran through the hall carrying rolls they had stolen from the kitchen. The dining room was too small for the table, so everyone had to squeeze behind chairs and pretend nobody was trapped. I arrived with rolls in one hand and a folder in the other. At that point, the folder had early notes only. Screenshots. Dates. The visible line from Marissa's draft. A summary of Elaine's note. A list of missing documents. Not enough to expose anyone. Enough to know I was not imagining the pattern. Dinner began with normal family noise. My aunt complained the potatoes were not her best, which she said every year. Marissa complimented the centerpiece. Darren told a long story about a donor who supposedly loved the workshop proposal. My father sat at the end of the table, quiet, cutting his turkey into pieces smaller than he needed. Then my cousin asked about my promotion. Before I could answer, Darren lifted his glass. To Leah, he said. Proof that if you complain long enough, people eventually mistake it for leadership. A few people laughed, not because it was funny, because laughter is the cheapest way to escape choosing a side. Darren leaned back and delivered the line he had saved for the room. Apparently being useful made you forget who actually belongs here. My aunt said, Darren, but she smiled when she said it. Marissa touched his sleeve and murmured, honey, but her face did not change. My father lowered his fork. He did not look at me. That was the public humiliation. Not just the sentence, the choreography around it. The wife pretending to restrain him. The aunt making it small. The cousins waiting for me to make it less awkward. The father studying his plate, while the daughter who had protected his project got turned into dinner entertainment. Darren smirked. Nothing to say? The old version of me would have explained. She would have listed everything she had done. She would have asked my father to tell the truth. She would have tried to win a fair hearing from a table that had already chosen comfort. I folded my napkin once, then twice. Then I said, enjoy dinner. That was all. Darren thought I had surrendered. He missed the part where surrender does not usually come with a folder. When dessert came, Marissa followed me into the kitchen. She shut the swinging door halfway, just enough to make the conversation private but not enough to look secret. She said, you know he's stressed. I rinsed a serving spoon. About what? The project, Dad, money, the committee. I dried the spoon slowly. Which committee issue? Her smile thinned. You know how documents can be misunderstood. I turned off the faucet. Send me the originals. Her eyes flicked toward my folder on the counter. What is that? Notes. About us? About records. The door swung open before she answered. My aunt came in carrying plates. Marissa stepped back and picked up a pie server like we had been discussing whipped cream. That was the first tiny confirmation. Not the words, the movement. A person who is not hiding anything does not reach for a prop when another witness enters. The next morning, I opened a new folder on my personal drive. I did not call it workshop timeline. I called it home repairs. I had learned from work that labels matter. If someone saw the folder name, I wanted them bored before they were curious. Then I built the first real timeline. Blue tabs for committee minutes. Yellow tabs for family claims. Green tabs for every place my name appeared. Pink tabs for money. By noon, the green pile was too thick. My name showed up in a correction note I had never received. It appeared beside a missed deadline. It appeared in a draft explanation for incomplete materials. The language was soft. Leah had concerns. Waiting on Leah's input. Family communications pending. Soft phrases are dangerous. They leave bruises without fingerprints. At 2 p.m, I drove to my father's house. He opened the door wearing his old gray cardigan and slippers with cracked soles. The television was on too loud in the living room. A football game neither of us cared about filled the room with fake urgency. His first words were not an apology. "Your brother says you're trying to embarrass him." I said, "Darren called my boss." My father rubbed his thumb along the doorframe. He was worried. "No," I said. "He was early." That made him look at me. I asked for the workshop ledger. The room changed. It was small, but there. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes moved toward the den before he told them not to. That glance gave me more information than his answer. "Why?" he asked. "Because everyone keeps talking about legacy. I want to know what the legacy actually cost." He did not like that, but he led me to the den. The ledger sat in the bottom drawer of a metal filing cabinet, wrapped in the same old rubber band. When he handed it to me, he did not let go right away. It felt like a test. I took it anyway. The pages smelled like paper, dust, and machine oil. I turned them slowly, while my father stood behind my shoulder. The first date that mattered was a repair deposit Darren had placed after a committee deadline. In my father's handwriting, it was recorded 6 weeks earlier. The second was a vendor payment Marissa labeled as outreach. My father wrote it as structural cleanup. The third note sat halfway down a page in black ink. "Darren wants Leah to draft correction. Says committee confused." I read it twice. My father cleared his throat. "That was nothing. I took a photo of the page. Then nobody will mind if it matches the public record." His face changed. Not guilt. Calculation. That scared me more. I copied 7 ledger pages. As I reached my car, he called from the porch. "Leah, don't make this public." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What did Darren do?" Not, "I should have stopped him." Just that. "Don't make this public." By sunset, I knew the ledger was not family history anymore. It was a fuse. If you have ever been used as the family cleanup crew, and then blamed for the mess, type ME. The Public Records Office sounded bored when I called, which made me trust it immediately. Board offices keep better records than dramatic families. I requested committee minutes, correction notices, public correspondence, attachment logs, meeting summaries, vendor references, and any file where my name appeared in connection with the workshop project. The clerk said, "That may take a few days." I said, "I understand." Then she added, "You might want to narrow the date range." I asked, what range had the highest number of records? She paused. Late September through mid-November. That was not the range Darren had mentioned. That was another tab. Records response 1 arrived 4 days later. The email subject was dull. The attachment was not. On page 12, a committee member had asked why the family had not answered a correction request. Darren's response was typed in plain black text. "Waiting on Leah to clarify messaging." The meeting date was 4 days before he called Elaine. That order mattered. He planted my name in the committee record. Then he warned my boss that I was unreliable. Then he mocked me at Thanksgiving, so the family would view any protest as instability. It was not a tantrum. It was a 3-step smear. A bad one, but still organized. I printed page 12 and placed it beside Elaine's note summary. The phrases lined up like 2 doors into the same room. Waiting on Leah. Questionable judgment. Unreliable. The words were not identical, but the job was the same. Move the blame toward me, before anyone asked who actually had the file. Records response. 2 arrived the next morning. This one contained attachments. Most were ordinary. Agenda. Meeting room, reservation. Donor update draft. Then I opened a file named Revised Outreach Allocation. The first page was a basic summary. The second page had a table. The table had one cell highlighted yellow. Family adjustment. That was Marissa's phrase. I had seen it before. It appeared in her screenshots, but never in files she sent whole. Under that phrase was a vendor number. I searched the number in my father's ledger photos. There it was. Same vendor. Same amount. Different label. In the ledger, it was structural cleanup. In Marissa's public summary, it was outreach. That difference mattered because outreach funds came from a donor category with fewer restrictions. Structural cleanup required committee review. Marissa had not just made the project sound better. She had moved a problem into a cleaner-looking bucket. I am not a lawyer, and I was not trying to become one. I knew enough from crisis work to understand the public risk. If the labels were questioned, they needed someone distracting. Someone emotional. Someone too involved. Someone whose name could fog the timeline. Me. Marissa called that night. I let it ring. She texted, "Please answer. This is getting ridiculous." I wrote, "Send questions in writing." 3 typing dots appeared. Vanished. Appeared again. Then nothing. The next morning, Darren sent, "You're scaring Dad." I replied, "Then explain page 12. No answer for 6 hours. Then my aunt called. Then my father. Then Marissa again. Nobody left a clear voicemail. That told me everything. Clear voicemails can be saved. At work, Elaine received a second message. This one came from a local partner tied to the redevelopment project. The email said my outside conduct might reflect poorly on my executive judgment. Elaine called me in and slid the printed email across her desk. "This is starting to look coordinated," she said. I placed a slim folder beside it. "Because it is." She read for 5 minutes. Her jaw tightened at page 12. Then she reached the vendor table and looked up. "Why would your name be connected to this?" "That is the point," I said. "It should not be." Elaine closed the folder. "I am pausing the promotion review until the committee clarifies the record." My stomach dropped. She raised one hand. "Pausing is not canceling." That sentence helped. Not enough. Because Darren had achieved one thing. He had dragged my career into the smoke. When I got home, there was an envelope taped to my apartment door. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a copy of a family photo from 5 years earlier. Me, Darren, Marissa, my father, my aunt, all standing in front of the workshop before the first donor event. On the back, someone had written one sentence: "Do you really want to be the reason this ends?" The handwriting was my aunt's. That was the moment the pressure stopped feeling emotional and started feeling organized. I photographed the envelope. I saved the note. Then I put it in the green section. Not because it proved the accounting issue, because it proved the family campaign. By then, I had stopped waiting for one dramatic confession. The truth was arriving in pieces. A note on a door. A line in a committee record. A vendor number. A phrase repeated in 2 rooms. A father who asked for privacy before he asked what happened. A sister-in-law who would not write a single clear sentence. The committee clarification session was scheduled for the following Thursday. The email said the meeting would address conflicting timelines around the workshop redevelopment project. Darren forwarded the notice to the family group chat. "Routine meeting. Please don't feed drama." I saved the screenshot. 10 minutes later, my aunt texted me privately. "Please don't attend. Your father's blood pressure can't handle a scene." I wrote, "There will not be a scene from me." She replied, "You know what I mean." Yes. I knew. She meant truth sounded rude when it reached a microphone. The night before the meeting, records response 3 arrived. I almost did not open it. It was late. My eyes hurt. The apartment was full of printed pages, sticky notes, and 3 mugs of coffee in different states of abandonment. But the subject line had one word the others did not. Attachment log. I opened it. The log showed who received the correction request, when it was sent, and what file had been attached. Darren received it. Marissa received it. A committee coordinator received it. I did not. Then I saw one more name. Nora, the committee chair. She had been copied on the original correction request. That meant she had seen the timeline before anyone dressed it up. I sat back in my chair. For the first time in weeks, I did not need to prove everything alone. The person running the meeting already had the door key. On Thursday night, I walked into the community center with a black binder and 2 copies of the ledger pages. The room smelled like floor cleaner, coffee, and cold rain from people's coats. Darren stood near the front in a navy blazer, smiling at a donor like he had slept well. Marissa held her clipboard. My father sat in the first row, both hands on his cane. My aunt sat behind him with her purse on her lap like she might need to leave quickly. When Darren saw me, his smile froze for half a second. Then he crossed the room and kissed my cheek for the audience. "Please don't make this ugly," he whispered. I said, "I brought copies." His hand dropped from my shoulder. The committee chair, Nora, arranged her papers at the front table with slow precision. She had silver hair cut at her jaw, narrow glasses, and the calm of a person who reads before meetings instead of during them. She opened with one sentence. "We are here to clarify the public record. Not family feelings. Not intention. The record." Darren went first. Of course he did. He thanked the committee. He thanked the community. He thanked my father for his vision. He used the word, legacy, 3 times in under 90 seconds. Then he reached for the fog. "This is really an internal family misunderstanding. Some informal communication roles became unclear, and we are trying to move forward without assigning blame." Without assigning blame. My name had been used in 3 documents and 2 workplace messages, but now he wanted peace. Nora looked at him over her glasses. "Miss Price's name appears in the record. Miss Price is present. She may clarify her role." Darren turned toward me. "She is making this personal." I opened the binder. "No, I'm making it chronological." The room shifted. Paper has a sound when people suddenly become afraid of it. I handed Nora the first packet. The green tabs show every place my name was used. The blue tabs show committee dates. The pink tabs show payment classifications. The ledger copies show my father's original workshop entries. Marissa spoke quickly. "A handwritten ledger is not an official filing." I nodded. "Correct. That is why I matched it to public dates." Nora turned the first page. Then the second. Darren tried to move the room back to emotion. "Leah has been very upset about Dad's property." Nora did not look up. "Mr. Price, I am asking about dates." That stopped him. For once, he could not move the room, from facts to feelings. Nora reached page 12. Her finger paused on the line, waiting on Leah to clarify messaging. She looked at Darren. "Who sent Miss Price the correction request?" Darren said, "I would have to check." Nora turned to Marissa. "Did you send it?" Marissa looked at her clipboard as if an answer might appear there. "I do not recall." Nora picked up another page. "The attachment log shows the request was sent to you, Mrs. Price, and Mr. Darren Price, not to Miss Leah Price." No one laughed now. Then Nora asked the question that cut through the whole performance. Why was Miss Price described as unreliable before any record showed she was responsible? My father closed his eyes. Marissa's pen stopped moving. Darren said, "We were trying to avoid embarrassment." Nora asked, "Whose embarrassment?" That was the twist he had not built a sentence for. I looked at Darren and said, "You used my name as your firebreak." His face reddened. I was protecting Dad. I slid one ledger copy across the table. "No. You were protecting the gap between Dad's dates and Marissa's labels." For the first time all night, Marissa spoke without polish. That is not fair. Nora looked at her. Then answer the date. Marissa did not. The room answered for her. Would you confront them at home or wait for the record? Confront is 1. Wait is 2. The committee did not shout. Real consequences rarely arrive like thunder. They arrive as corrections. Nora summarized the record in a flat voice. There was no evidence that I caused the missed deadline. There was no record showing I received the correction request. My name had been used in public explanation without direct confirmation. The committee would amend the summary. Future communications could not use my name, role, or workplace credibility without written confirmation from me. Darren stared at the table. Marissa kept clicking her pen until Nora asked her to stop. My father did not look at me. Then the local sponsor in the second row raised his hand. He was an older man named Mr. Klein, the owner of a building supply company that had pledged materials for the project. He said, if the outreach allocation was actually structural cleanup, does that change the donor category? The room tightened. Darren turned toward him too quickly. That is a separate issue. Nora looked at the pink tabs. It may be connected if the timeline was affected by classification. Marissa said, those labels were preliminary. Mr. Klein asked, preliminary when you sent them to us. That was the second crack. Not my words. Not my family. A donor. Darren had prepared for me to look emotional. He had not prepared for a sponsor to ask a plain business question. Marissa flipped pages on her clipboard. Her fingers moved fast, but she was not finding anything. Because the clean version was not there. I pointed to the second pink tab. The vendor number appears in both places. My father's ledger lists it as structural cleanup. The public summary lists it as outreach. Darren said, Leah is not an accountant. No, I said, but I can read matching numbers. That line landed harder than I expected. A woman in the back whispered something to the person beside her. My aunt heard it and turned red. Nora asked Marissa to provide the source documentation within 3 business days. Marissa nodded. Darren looked at me like I had just opened a window in a room full of smoke. After the meeting, Darren followed me into the hallway. Leah, we need to contain this. Not fix. Contain. I turned around. You contacted my boss. That was different. How? His eyes flicked toward 2 committee members standing near the door. That was before all this became public. There it was. Public was the line, not wrong. Marissa stepped beside him and lowered her clipboard against her thigh. We all made mistakes. I said, name mine. She opened her mouth. No sound came out. I waited. A long pause is useful when someone has built a lie out of soft language. Finally, she said, you could have come to us privately. You went to my boss privately, I said. I went to the records publicly. My father came into the hallway last. He looked older than he had inside the room. For 1 second, I thought he might finally say my name like I was the injured person. Instead, he said, your mother would have hated seeing this. My mother had been gone for 9 years. Dragging her into that hallway was not grief. It was leverage. I said, she would have hated the lie first. Darren muttered, unbelievable. I walked outside before they could turn the hallway into another dinner table. Cold air hit my face. I opened my phone beside my car. 7 messages were already waiting, but I did not read the long ones. I opened a new note instead and wrote the only 3 things that mattered. Darren asked to contain it. Marissa could not name my mistake. Dad used mom after the record turned. Then I saved the note, took 1 photo of the community center doors, and drove home with the radio off. The next morning, I added a new green tab to the binder. Post-meeting pressure. Not because the messages proved the ledger. Because pressure after exposure is part of the exposure. 2 days later, Elaine received the committee correction. She called me into her office and handed me the printed copy. The unsupported concern regarding my reliability was gone. The timeline was corrected. My role was clarified. Elaine tapped the last paragraph. This clears the issue. I nodded. She said, "The promotion review is moving forward." I had imagined that moment would feel victorious. It felt more like air coming back into a room. Then Elaine added, "For what it is worth, you handled this exactly like someone ready for senior crisis leadership." That line stayed with me longer than Darren's insult. By Monday, the fallout had started, and it did not look like a shouting match. It looked like documents changing hands. Mr. Klein asked for revised backup before releasing his materials pledge. Another committee member requested a review of Marissa's classifications. The public summary was amended. The project website replaced Darren's polished paragraph with a shorter correction notice. I printed both versions and laid them side by side. On the old version, my name sat beside communication delay. On the new version, my name was gone. That blank space felt better than any apology they could have performed. Darren's name stayed on the project, but the shine came off it. That mattered more to him than a formal warning. He could explain conflict. He could not explain supervision. At 4:30 that afternoon, Mr. Klein's assistant sent a revised sponsor checklist to the committee. The checklist had one new column: documentation source. That one column did what months of family conversations never did. It forced every claim to point somewhere real. Marissa's soft labels did not fit neatly inside that column. Family adjustment needed a source. Outreach bundle needed a source. Waiting on Leah needed a source. On Friday, the project website updated again. A new PDF appeared under the meeting archive. It was titled Clarified Timeline and Source Index. I opened it, expecting a simple correction. Instead, I found a table with 3 columns: claim, source, status. Every line that had once leaned on my name now had a different answer. Correction request received by Darren and Marissa. Confirmed. No delivery record to Leah Price. Confirmed. Outreach classification under review. Pending source file. The table did not insult anyone. It did something worse for Darren. It made his version unnecessary. I printed the PDF and placed it behind the committee correction. Then I highlighted one blank space. There was no column for feelings. No column for who sounded worried. No column for who had the better family voice. Just claim, source, status. That became the new rhythm of the story. Every time Darren tried to turn the matter back into personality, the committee turned it back into source. Every time Marissa softened a phrase, Nora asked for the file behind it. The project did not collapse in one dramatic scene. It was boxed in by paperwork. And that was exactly why Darren had tried to move the blame toward me early. He knew the records would eventually ask for a person to stand in the gap. He shows me. The mistake was thinking I would stay there. By Wednesday, Nora's office circulated a follow-up request for original files. No commentary, no accusation, just file names, dates, and deadlines. I watched the email thread from the outside and did not answer unless my name was used. That was the first clean boundary. Not silence. Restraint with a receipt. Darren left one voicemail that evening. "Lee, you made your point. Don't punish everyone forever." I saved it in a folder labeled Contact Boundaries. Not for revenge, for memory. The next morning, I sent one written boundary to Darren and Marissa. Do not use my name again in project records, workplace conversations, donor explanations, or family statements. Darren replied, "Lawyer language now?" I wrote back, "Clear language." Then I stopped responding. The story did not need another circular family call. It needed fewer doors for them to walk through. The promotion became official in January. Senior Communications Director. Elaine announced it in a staff meeting with a short speech about steadiness under pressure. I stood at the front of the conference room, while people clapped. No one there knew the full story. They did not know about the ledger pages, the Thanksgiving glass, the cropped document, or the committee room. They only saw a woman getting promoted. That was enough. After work, I bought Thai food, sat on the floor, because my table had not arrived, and ate dinner while snow tapped the window. No urgent draft arrived. No donor paragraph needed saving. No one asked me to make an ugly thing sound acceptable by morning. The quiet felt strange, so I gave it a practical job. I unpacked one box, then another. I set the committee correction, the cropped ledger page, and Elaine's note into one file. I labeled it closed record. That label mattered. Closed. Not forgotten. Not forgiven. Closed. A week later, my father asked for one phone call. I gave him 10 minutes. He said, "Your brother says you won't talk to him." That is true. He is still your brother. I know. You are tearing the family apart. I looked at the committee letter on my desk. No, Dad. I stopped holding together what Darren was allowed to break. He said, "I was trying to protect the project." That was the closest he came to the truth. "You protected the project from the person protecting it," I said. He had no answer. I gave him one boundary. Do not contact my workplace again. Do not use my name in project records. Do not ask me to protect a story that used me as the damage. He asked, "For how long?" "Until peace is no longer treated like my responsibility." 10 minutes ended. So did the call. If receipts beat excuses, type proof. And be honest, was cutting them off justice, or was it too far? Darren sent one more message. "I hope the job was worth losing your family." I read it once. Years earlier, I would have studied that sentence for pain, guilt, maybe a hidden request to be loved. This time, I treated it like data. Darren had learned nothing. So I gave him nothing to work with. I deleted the message. Not archived. Deleted. Marissa tried a different door in February. A holiday card arrived late enough to feel less like kindness and more like strategy. The front had a watercolor wreath. Inside, she had written, "Families heal when everyone chooses grace." No apology. No subject. No date. No line that said, "I used your name." I placed the card in the contact boundaries folder and did not respond. 3 days after that card arrived, a padded envelope came to my office. No return address. Elaine's assistant brought it to my door and said, "This came through reception." That alone told me it was not normal. My family knew my home address. Sending something to my workplace was a choice. Inside the envelope was a photocopy of one ledger page. Not the full page. A cropped section. Someone had circled a line where my father had written, "Leah reviewed donor draft." Under it, in thick black marker, someone had written, "C." That was supposed to scare me. It almost worked. For about 10 seconds, I stared at the cropped page and felt the old heat rise in my chest. Then I noticed the page number. The crop came from page 74. My copy of the ledger page was page 74 too. But my full page had the next 3 lines. Darren requested correction draft. Committee confused. No filing roll. Whoever sent the crop had removed the part that protected me. That was not a mistake. That was editing. I walked to Elaine's office with the envelope, the cropped copy, and my full ledger scan. She read both versions. Her face did not move until she reached the missing lines. Then she said, "They sent this here." Yes. She placed the cropped page on her desk beside the full scan. That is not concern anymore. That is interference. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She asked me to forward everything to Human Resources, not as a family complaint, but as documentation of repeated external contact involving my workplace. I did. The HR director, a man named Paul, asked for a short meeting. I expected awkwardness. Instead, he had already printed a timeline. Elaine's note. The second partner email. The committee correction. The padded envelope. 4 entries. 4 dates. Paul tapped the last one with his pen. "Do you expect more contact?" I looked at the list. For the first time, I answered like a crisis director instead of a daughter. "Yes." He nodded. "Then we will route reception accordingly." That sentence felt small. It was not. It meant my workplace was no longer an open door for Darren's version of me. The next attempt came through LinkedIn. Darren did not message me directly. He liked a public post from my organization about my promotion, then commented, "Proud of my sister. Family always knew she could be intense, but she gets results." It looked harmless if you did not know him. It looked supportive if you had never been handled by him. But intense was the new, soft word. Unstable had failed. Unreliable had failed. Now he was trying intense. I screenshotted the comment before he deleted it 6 hours later. Then I sent it to Paul with one sentence. Pattern continues in public professional space. Paul replied, "Received. No emotion. No lecture. Just received." That was when I understood the real power of records. They stand still while the story keeps trying to move. 2 weeks later, Mr. Klein called my work line. That surprised me enough that I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief. "Miss Price, this is Howard Klein. I do not want to pull you back into family matters, but your name came up again in a project explanation. I thought you should know." I called him from a conference room with the blinds closed. He sounded uncomfortable. He said Darren had told a small sponsor group that I had stepped away abruptly and left the project in a documentation mess. I opened my laptop while he spoke. "Was that in writing?" "Yes," he said. "In a recap email." "Can you forward it?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I believe that is fair." The email arrived 12 minutes later. Darren had used my name again. Not directly as blame this time. As atmosphere. Leah stepped away abruptly during a sensitive documentation period. That was the phrase. Abruptly. Sensitive. Documentation period. Hey, it was almost elegant. I forwarded it to Nora Bell, with the committee correction attached. I wrote, "This appears inconsistent with the amended record. Please advise whether the committee wants my name removed from future project summaries." Nora replied the next morning. Her answer was short. "The committee will issue a reminder that Miss Price is not to be referenced in project communications without direct written authorization." That reminder went to Darren, Marissa, the sponsor list, and my father. It did not accuse. It did not dramatize. It simply closed another door. Darren called me 11 minutes after it landed. I did not answer. He left a voicemail. "You are making it impossible to move on." I saved it. Then I wrote one note in the folder. Translation. Moving on means letting him keep the edited version. I did not send that note to anyone. It was just for me. Some documents are not for courtrooms or committees. Some are for the part of you that starts doubting the pattern when the room gets quiet. My aunt tried once more to organize a dinner. Her message ended with, "You were always the practical one." That was the old hook. A compliment shaped like an assignment. I wrote one answer. "I am not available for repair work." She sent a question mark. I did not explain it. By spring, the workshop project had changed. Mr. Klein reduced his materials pledge until the committee received clean documentation. Marissa no longer handled direct donor reports. Darren remained involved, but every public update had 2 committee reviewers attached. That was the kind of consequence Darren hated most. Not being removed. Being supervised. A man like Darren can explain a scandal. He has a harder time explaining why someone is now checking his work. My father left one voicemail in April. He said he found an old wrench of mine in the workshop and wanted to know if I wanted it. I knew the wrench. It was small, blue-handled, from a summer when I was 13, and thought learning tools would make my father see me the way he saw Darren. I almost called back. Then I remembered the porch. "Don't make this public." I texted, "You can keep it." He replied, "Okay." That was the whole exchange. No speech. No fight. Just one more small object I let stay behind. People imagine boundary endings as dramatic. Mine happened in tiny cuts. A blocked thread. A declined dinner. A new emergency contact form. A locked file. A number changed. A holiday spent with friends who did not ask me to perform forgiveness before dessert. The first Thanksgiving after the committee meeting, I did not go to my aunt's house. I went to Elaine's. She invited several people from work who had no local family or no interest in family theater. There was one burned pie, one excellent turkey, and a long argument about which movie counted as a Thanksgiving movie. Nobody raised a glass to humiliate anyone. Nobody asked me to laugh at my own injury. When my phone buzzed, I checked it out of habit. It was a photo from my cousin. The old dining room table. Darren at the center. My father at the end. Marissa looking toward the camera with a tight smile. The message said, "Feels weird without you." I stared at the photo. Then I noticed something on the table near Darren's plate. A folder. Black. Not mine. I zoomed in. The photo blurred. The folder had a white label, but I could not read it. For a moment, my body went back to the committee room. Then another text came in from the same cousin. Darren brought paperwork to prove his side, but Dad told him to put it away. I read that line twice. My father had not defended me when it mattered. But a year later, in the same room where Darren had mocked me, he stopped the replay. It was not enough to rebuild trust. It was enough to tell me the record had reached him. I did not answer right away. Then I wrote, "Thanks for telling me." My cousin replied, "I think he misses you." Maybe he did. Missing someone is not the same as making them safe. That was one of the last lessons. Loneliness is not an apology. Regret is not repair. Family history is not a permission slip. This story is fictional and created for entertainment and educational purposes, but the lesson is real. Self-worth is not measured by how much damage you can absorb. Personal boundaries are not cruelty. Protecting yourself from manipulation sometimes begins with keeping the record people hoped you would never request. I still have a copy of my father's ledger pages. Not on my desk. Not framed like a trophy. Just filed away. Because proof should protect your life, not become your life. The apartment is quieter now. My phone does not light up with Darren's emergencies. My inbox is not full of Marissa's half-sent documents. No one asks me to make an ugly thing sound acceptable by Friday morning. Some evenings, I make coffee and sit by the window after work. There is traffic below, a neighbor's dog barking somewhere, heat ticking in the wall. Ordinary sounds. Clean sounds. The kind I used to miss because my family always arrived with another crisis. For years, quiet meant they had abandoned me in a room where I needed help. Now it means the door is locked from my side. I did not lose my family that year. I lost the unpaid job of making their lies look organized. If you are angry for Leah, say it. If this reminds you of something you lived through, you can share one word, or the whole story. And be honest. Should she ever forgive them, or was the boundary the real ending?